Okay, so I'm going to give you a few tips on how to help you memorize the unit circle or to know the different sine and cosine values for any angle around the unit circle. So we're going to start by looking at our hand. And if you label the angles, if you think about 0 is your pinky and 90 degrees is straight up, and you can imagine that these are radians too. I just went ahead and wrote them out as degrees. Then you've got 0 degrees, 30, 45, 60, and 90, which are those 5 primary angles that we use in each quadrant. Okay, so right now we're just looking in quadrant 1 at these angles. So if I want to know the sine or cosine values for any of these 5 angles, these are the tricks that I can use. The cosine of each angle is going to be the square root of the number of fingers that you have above that angle divided by 2. The sine of that angle is going to be the square root of the number of fingers below that angle. Okay, so I'm going to show you all the different angles and show you how this works. So first, if I look at the sine and cosine of 30 degrees. So for the cosine, it's the square root of the number of fingers above or on top of 30 degrees divided by 2, and then the sine is going to be the square root of the number of fingers below or on the bottom of 30 degrees. So for cosine, that's going to be the square root of 3, because there's 3 fingers above 30 divided by 2. And then for the sine, it's going to be the square root of 1, which is 1 over 2. So the cosine of 30 is square root of 3 over 2. Sine of 30 is 1/2. Okay, 45 degrees. So square root of the numbers on top over 2 is going to be square root of 2 over 2. Square root of the numbers on bottom, square root of 2 over 2. Okay, cosine and sine of 90 degrees. So for the cosine, it's the square root of the numbers above 90 degrees. Well, there aren't any fingers above 90 degrees. So that's the square root of 0, which is 0 divided by 2 is just 0. And then for the fingers below, there's 4 fingers below. So that's the square root of 4 divided by 2. Square root of 4 is 2. And 2 divided by 2 is equal to 1. Okay, so let's go through the other two as well. So 60 degrees, cosine of 60 degrees is going to be the square root of 1 over 2, which is just going to be 1 over 2. Sine of 60 is going to be the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, then let's look at 0. So cosine of 0 is going to be the square root of 4 over 2, which is 2 over 2, which is 1. Sine of 0, there aren't any fingers below 0, so that's square root of 0 divided by 2 is 0. Okay, so if you just look at your hand, you have those 5 essential angles. That's from quadrant 1. Now, you could do some other magic tricks and move your fingers and hands in different ways to get the other quadrants. You just need to think about what's positive and what's negative. Okay, but that'll give you those reference angles for quadrant 1. Okay, so I'm also going to go through each quadrant and show you how I fill in the unit circle or how I remember what those values are. I've gone ahead and labeled each angle and in degrees and in radians. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to start with the cosine values, and I'm going to go up to 90 degrees or pi over 2. So we're going to start with 1. Then the numbers are going to get smaller as we go up. So square root of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, 1 over 2, and then 0. So those numbers get smaller because it's getting closer and closer back to the origin. They're getting closer and closer to 0. Okay, thinking about the x direction. Okay, now for the sine values, they're going to get bigger. So we're going to start with 0, or actually we're going to go the reverse direction. So we're going to start at 90 degrees and do 1, and those same numbers just go in the opposite direction. Square root of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, 1/2, and then 0. So cosine is going to get bigger, or it's going to get smaller going up. Sine is going to get smaller going down. Okay. So here's the whole unit circle, and I'm just going to go through and fill everything in and talk you through how to remember each part of the unit circle. So we're going to start with the degrees. 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270. Hopefully those 4 angles we can get no problem. Okay, 360. So then halfway in each quadrant is always going to be 45 degrees. So between 0 and 90 is 45. Then you can just add 45 degrees to those other angles that we already have. So 90 plus 45 is 135. 180 plus 45 is 225. 270 plus 45 is 315. Okay, then the next angles are in increments of 30. Okay, so the one right after those 4 angles on the axis, we're going to just add 30 degrees. So 30, and then you've got 60. So 90 plus 30 is 120. You could also do 90 plus 60 to get 150, or you could subtract 30, whatever way you want to think of it. 30 subtracted from 180 is 150 if you want to go that way. Okay, so 180 plus 30 is 210. 180 plus 60 is 240. 270 plus 30 is 300. 270 plus 60 is 330. So that will give you all of your angles. Just remember it's in increments of 30, 45, and 60. Okay, now for the radians. So we're going to start with 0 radians, pi radians. If you've got those two, you should be able to get there. Okay, and then 2 pi is all the way back around. So if pi is halfway around the circle, then half of a half, we're going to divide by 2 again, so straight up is pi over 2. And then straight down, this is like 1.5 pi's is 3 pi over 2. So you can think of it as 0 pi over 2, 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, if you think of it that way. Okay, now we're going to do the pi over 4, so these are in fourths. So 1 pi over 4, straight up would be 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, straight across is 4 pi over 4, which is 1 pi, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4 is the same as 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4, and then back around would be 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi. Okay, so think of it as a fourth. Okay, now we're going to split up into sixths and thirds. Okay, so the first angle is pi over 6, and then at 60 degrees, that's pi over 3. So you can think of it as 1 pi over 6, and then 2 pi over 6. 3 pi over 6 is the same as pi over 2. And then you've got 4 pi over 6, 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6 is the same as pi, 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6 is the same as 4 pi over 3, 9 pi over 6 is the same as 3 pi over 2, 10 pi over 6 is the same as 5 pi over 3, 11 pi over 6, and then all the way back around would be 12 pi over 6. Okay, so think of that as in sixths going all the way around, and you can reduce if you need to. Okay, so now for our sine and cosine values. So our first ordered pair is 1, 0, 0, 1 straight up, -1, 0 at pi, and 0, -1. So you should be able to get those 4 main points because those are just points on the unit circle. Okay, so our halfways are always going to be square root of 2 over 2 in some form or fashion, whether it's positive or negative. And we know in quadrant 1 everything is positive. In quadrant 2, only cosine is negative. So it's the same value, just the cosine or the first one is negative. Quadrant 3, they're both negative. Quadrant 4, the sine is negative. Okay, so all 4 of those are the same value, just the sign, positive or negative, changes in each quadrant. Okay, then we've got square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2. and 1/2 square root of 3 over 2. So those are just going to flip-flop in each quadrant, and again the signs are going to change. So in quadrant 1, signs are all positive. Quadrant 2, that matches up, 2 pi over 3 matches up to pi over 3. They're the same value, it's just the cosine is negative. And then at 5 pi over 6, it's negative square root of 3 over 2 comma 1/2. So that's the same as pi over 6. Again, the cosine is negative. In quadrant 3, same value, negative square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2. Everything is negative in quadrant 3. Negative 1/2, negative square root of 3 over 2. Quadrant 4, those values are going to flip over. This time just the sign is going to be negative. So 1/2, negative square root of 3 over 2, and then square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2. Okay, so there's just little patterns that you can learn to figure out all of those values for sine and cosine on the unit circle.